Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes.
And me, Simon Mann.
New Zealand have been blown away not just by the one in Wellington, but also by England's fast bowlers as well. It's a huge victory for England to take the series 2-0 after barely 2.5 days play. Extraordinary performance. We'll look back at that. We'll also look at Australia doing the job on India, a 10-wicket win for them in Adelaide, again in short time space, really. So Test cricket really is on speed. And don't forget also our premium site, the Analyst Plus, where you can hear the first episode of our special look back at the 1974-75 Ashes series where England battled against Thompson and Lilly and lost. You can get that on patreon.com/theanalyst25. We'll play a little clip from that shortly. But first, look back at England's fantastic performance in Wellington, which, compared to the first test, Simon, it was a commanding performance by England, really, from the start.
Yeah, well, they were 43 before, weren't they, on that first day? And then Harry Brook took over. And then once Harry Brook and Ollie Pope had taken over, England didn't look back and crushed New Zealand well inside the distance. Horrible days weather to deal with today. They always say, but you go to Wellington, you need an into-the-wind bowler, and they certainly did today. That was Chris Wokes and Shoaib Bashir, who picked up 4 wickets between them. And there was no doubt that England were going to win this game from probably lunchtime yesterday, lunchtime on the second day, when they had that lead of over 200 with 9 wickets in hand, and inexorably they just took New Zealand down. And yeah, another hammering, 323 runs. 8 wickets in the first test. They should have won the series 2-0 last time. They enforced the follow-on and lost the game. If they batted again, they would have won that match. They'd have set New Zealand, similar to this game probably, and gradually turned the screw and won the match. So, and of course they beat New Zealand heavily in England last time. So they've really, actually, I think they've got the sort of wood on New Zealand. Their type of cricket and their type of bowling, I think, suits the way England play. That aggressive approach. I think one of the lessons, or one of the learnings, I suppose, from this winter is England's approach works against this type of cricket, this type of bowling attack. Against the spinning ball, well, they have to rethink it and play in a different way. But when the pitches are okay for scoring and the bowling is, fast, medium, and the ball's coming onto the bat, well, then it does work. And England's strategy has been an excellent one, and they've thoroughly deserved what they've achieved.
Just listening to Harry Brook talking after the game about his strategy, his approach in his innings when he saw England decline to 40 for 4, and he realised that the pitch was doing a fair bit and that the bowling was pretty good, and that his best form of defence was attack. And of course it worked. He said very modestly it came off. It was an absolute gem of an innings, an extraordinary performance, in a way replicated in Australia by Travis Head. There's a parallel there in the way that both of those played. Again, the Aussies were not reeling exactly, but they weren't doing that well against the Indian seam attack. And Head took them to the cleaners, 140, brilliant innings. And it's his favourite ground, the Adelaide Oval, but the Indians had no answer. And really, those 2 innings, the Harry Brook innings for England and the Travis Head one for Australia, are the difference between the sides. Obviously in the end England won by a huge margin, but it was England's 280 really on the back of that extraordinary innings by Brook of 123 that put the game not out of New Zealand's reach, but on that pitch that was a very good score. And if England bowled well, which they did, then the lead was 155, and as you said, from the second day onwards, it was really one-way traffic. And I think the same in the Adelaide Oval. The problem that we'll get into this a bit more, but the problem that India had was they never took wickets at key times, and therefore, when the twilight descended on Adelaide, that's the time you need to take wickets. India failed to, and Australia used the conditions very well today. So. It was the batting, it was the dramatic assault of both Harry Brook in Wellington and Travis Head in Adelaide that really changed their games.
Yeah, I suppose you could say one thing. I was just at one sort of cap tip to Labuschagne and McSweeney in that first innings. So they batted through most of that twilight period, didn't they, against the pink ball, and just resisted and left, and they were only one down overnight, and that just pushed Australia forward. So they were about 100 behind with 9 wickets left going into the second day, and then Travis Head was able to capitalise. I mean, they're, in a way, Head and Brook, they're similar type of players, aren't they? They're devastating when they get going, and you're very difficult to bowl that. They do give you a chance. You feel you can get them out, but if you let them stay in for too long, I mean, they can ruin a game. And the Indians have had enough of Travis Head, haven't they? They've seen quite a bit of him. He's won this game. He won the World Test Championship final against them. He won the World Cup final against them. That's not a bad hat trick, that.
No, you're quite right. And I mean, they are slightly different players in the sense that I think Travis Head does give you more chances. He does, waft at the ball outside off stump, and he doesn't really move his feet much. Brook is a slightly more technically accomplished player, I think, but he's still powerful through the offside, a bit like Travis Head. He likes the offside, and it's quite a change, isn't it, in style from, if you look at the batters that have been prolific in the last 25, 30 years, the guys that have changed the game, I'm talking Steve Smith, Kevin Peterson, and further back, someone like Viv Richards, they were more prolific on the leg side and went across their stumps to the offside to hit balls off the stumps through the leg side. But Brook is the other way. Brook is more adept at getting outside leg stump and hitting balls off the stumps through the offside. So it is a slight change of emphasis. Brook, by the way, has gone up to third spot now in the highest test averages list, only behind Adam Voges, who's a bit of a sort of wild card in that list, and obviously Don Bradman. Don Bradman averaging 99, Adam Voges averaging 63, and now Harry Brook averaging 61.62. So he's gone ahead of Graham Pollock with the same number of test matches, 23. I played against Graham Pollock, the brilliant South African left-hander, and it was horrendous bowling it to him. He was a huge man, a bit like Brook, very tall. I mean, even taller than Brook, in fact. And he just had this stature at the crease. It was almost like a sort of an immovable obstacle, huge presence. And basically, he hardly moved his feet. He smashed it through the offside if it was pitched up, and pulled or cut it if it was a bit short. Kept it to sort of 3 basic shots, and absolutely took Australia to the cleaners in the 1960s. I remember trying to bowl to him and just thinking, it was like a giant, bowling at a giant, actually. Not only in his size, in his power of stroke. And it must be the same bowling to Brook, because in this sort of form, especially away from home, you don't know where to bowl him. I think the only possible way of bowling to him, really, with a seamer, is bouncing him. And Australia made that work, didn't they, in the Ashes, by trying to get into his head and getting the ball up high. And he got out a couple of times to the hook shot, or attempting to hit short ball somewhere else. So that will be something that Australia will think about in a year's time. But for the moment, blimey, no one can bowl to him.
I think both sides will be thinking about the short ball a lot in a year's time. England against Travis Head, for example, and Australia against a few of the England batters. I think that's going to be one of the aspects of the series. And England, of course, tried it again today. They went to short ball theory. Just on Voges, I mean, he is a real outlier, isn't he? He played 20 test matches, and his test career only lasted for around about 16 months. June the 3rd, 2015, he started his test career, and his last test match was in November 2016 against South Africa in Hobart. He was a latecomer, and he averaged 61.87, 20 test matches. I suppose the thing is about Harry Brook, he's only just over 20 test matches, isn't he? So, Don Bradman's 99. If Brook's still averaging in the 60s when he's played 50, 60, 70 test matches, then, wow, cricket supporters around the world are in for a treat, aren't they, in the next few years? I think he does give you a chance. I mean, he gave New Zealand 5 chances in the last test match. This one was a more clinical, ruthless and spectacular innings. I mean, it's stunning hitting. He was actually off the field today as well. He's got a sore ankle, so I don't know whether that means he's not going to be fit for the next test match. I mean, England won the series, of course. World Test Championship, they can't qualify for the for the final, I should say. I actually had a look at this, yours, because I was just interested to see where they would have been if they hadn't had their bowling points deducted for slow over rate. They've had 22 points deducted for slow over rate, and if they won the last test of the series, what percentage they would be on. And I reckon it's just over 56%, and that might be good enough, but at the moment it would not put them in the top two, wouldn't even put them in the top three. But there's lots of games still to be played, and people can take points off each other and knock each other out. So it's hard to know. But that just shows how close England are. If they hadn't bowled their overs slowly over the course of the World Test Championship, you feel. We've said this a couple of times. You feel they're good enough to really be competing for the final, and they've rather missed their opportunity. And you can think back to 2 or 3 games they've blown, if you like, as well, or have been unfortunate in. There was obviously the Manchester Test match against the Australians, where they probably would have won that, and that would have made a difference. There was the match at the Oval, where I thought they were, if they. That was cavalier. That was a game they should have won, really, and they just got a bit loose and lost the game. I don't think it was a game they should have been losing. So so they're close. They're very close, and they're good enough to be in the top 2. Let's see what happens next time in the next cycle of World Test Championship, where they actually.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because it could be.
Play a bit more cannily. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's a shame because England haven't been in the World Test Championship final yet, and there won't be, as you say, this time. What an absolute appetite whetter for the Ashes it would be if the World Test Championship final in June was Australia-England. Fantastic kind of setup for the summer, with England then playing India, and then obviously the Ashes to come next winter. But it's not going to be that. It's a 3-horse race at the moment in the World Test Championship, I think, between Australia, who are now top with 60 points, and then South Africa sneaking in there in second place at the moment with 59, and India have slumped to third with 57. A lot of cricket still to play, so 3 test matches, of course, in Australia for India, and then you've had a look at the South Africa itinerary.
Yeah, well, South Africa are playing Sri Lanka as we speak, and they've got a lead of over 300. Sri Lanka is still in it as well, because if they were to chase down 300, you feel that's unlikely in this Test match, but you never know. They might have they've got to go for it as well if they want to qualify. And then they play Australia at home twice, so that's a tricky series for Australia, and potentially in Sri Lankan conditions. So that could tilt it back in Sri Lanka's way. And the other thing is, well, that South Africa have got to play 2 tests at home to Pakistan over Boxing Day and over New Year. So if they were to win this one and those 2, then they would qualify for the final. So there's lots of permutations where teams can kind of take points off each other, and you think you're taking a step forward, and then someone can beat you and they knock you back. So that's how it works with the percentage system. England just behind, really. They're close, but not close enough. I think that's the situation as far as England are concerned. But it's another talking about. It's a good focus. I mean, the Australia-India series is fascinating enough on its own, but there's also that aspect as well where they're kind of possibly just vying for one place over the next few weeks, one place in the final. Australia coming back to win this Test match didn't particularly surprise me. I thought there's a lot of criticism flying around after the first Test match, and the way India played, went out there and won with lots of newish players, and you think, is this Australia side on the decline? Well, they showed in this game that they're still a pretty formidable unit at home, and they've got some good cricketers, not least Travis Head, and that bowling attack when they get going, the likes of Stark in the first innings, Pat Cummins in the second. Let's talk a bit more about England today, Yoz, shall we? I mean, the first thing,
Joe Root.
England batting on. Joe Root making his 36th Test match 100. I mean, that was kind of felt inevitable. England was batting for him. He played 2 or 3 spectacular shots today, but the shot that brought him his 100, he was on 98. So what shot does Joe Root play when he's on 98 not out? You'd think, well, I don't know, knock it off his hit for 2 backward a square, or push it through mid wicket, or guide it away down towards deep backward point for a couple of runs, or even just take a single and wait till you're on 99 and then knock a single. No, what was it? It was the reverse ramp. for 4, and he only just got it as well, didn't he? He didn't time it. He just about got it over the keeper. It wasn't one of his convincing ones, but it also wasn't one of his sort of downfall ones. Think of the Bumrah one in India, and there was a real sort of look of triumph on his face, wasn't there? That I've done it. I set out to do it, and I pulled it off with a reverse ramp. It's just almost like, take that, everybody.
I think it was. I think there was just a hint of relief as well, because it, as you say, he didn't quite get it, and it came off the top of the bat and the glove and looped over the keeper's head, and eventually carried on to the boundary. But it's such a risky shot to play. It's such a kind of premeditated shot. You can't bail out of it once you're set to play that shot. He was playing it off a Will O'Rourke, who bowls 86, 87 miles an hour, tall, fast bowler, difficult bowler to play that shot against. So it was a risk. He achieved it. He must practice it a fair bit, I suppose. And Root has now gone to, as you say, 36 Test hundreds, level with Rahul Dravid, and only 4 men have scored more. Obviously Tendulkar, Ponting, Sangakkara and Jacques Kallis. So fifth most hundreds, including it level with Dravid, the 5th most hundreds of all time. Amazing performance, and plenty more to go as well, I'm sure.
Well, it looks like it, doesn't it? 127 balls, so quite skittish. I suppose England was so on top, and he had that license and that freedom. The fields were back as well, so he just said, "Right, I'll have another Test hundred." I suppose when you've scored 35 Test hundreds, and England are 580 runs ahead, then you're free to take the risk you want to make the 36th. I mean, you're only doing yourself down. You're not doing the team down, are you? The team's achieved what it wants to achieve, and it's going to go on and win the game. So it's your own personal risk, and I suppose it's a nice one to have in the locker, isn't it? Reverse ramping to go to your 100. And as soon as that happened, well, not quite as soon as that happened, he made his 100. Then he danced down the pitch, smacked O'Rourke back over his head for a stunning 6. And then nicked one behind, and the players were off the field. England declared the players were off the field. The umpires weren't sure whether the ball had carried to Blundell or not, and so the players had gone off. And then I think they were just deciding whether England were 427 for 5 declared or 427 for 6 declared. Well, as it was, they thought the ball did carry, and I thought it did too. So Root was out, even though he was probably in the pavilion by then, because they rushed off. So New Zealand was set 583 to win on a horrible sort of windy, cooler day in Wellington, and I have to say, I mentioned this yesterday. Just looking at the pitch and looking at even what was happening during England's innings, you thought there's enough in this surface for England to work with, and so it proved. There's enough seam movement, there was enough bounce, and they gradually worked their way through New Zealand's batting lineup. Wokes bowled superbly, I thought, with a new ball into the wind, a couple of beauties to get wickets, Conway and Williamson. And then Cast comes on, and what do you know, it gets a wicket in his first over. Everything's going his way. Really, again, demonstrating his athleticism with a fine caught and bowled. There was some resistance from New Zealand, from Tom Blundell, made a dashing 100. I mean, in other circumstances, you'd say, what a stunning innings. But very important for him because he's under pressure. But it felt kind of meaningless in the context of the game, really, because it was just a bit of a last hurrah from New Zealand because they're heading for a big defeat. It just lessened the size of the defeat, really.
Well, so as you said, Chris Wokes bowling very well with the new ball for England, and he certainly looks a revived character in this series, doesn't he? He's looked a bit more like his old self in England, utilising the conditions, enjoying actually this little bit of extra bounce. Lovely couple of deliveries. Devon Conway bowled through the gate, and we looked at why New Zealand's struggling. Well, that's one reason. Conway just can't get a run at the moment, and you think back to how impressive he was when he first played Test cricket. He got a double 100, didn't he, on debut at Lord's against England. And he just looked as if everything was hitting the middle of the bat. He was moving beautifully into the ball, couldn't do a thing wrong. And now he's searching for it. And it's incredible how it goes like that, isn't it, cricket, and batting in particular. Just something, little things just not working, and suddenly you can't get a run. Zach Crawley would be the same. Maybe they should go and have a beer together, those two, and sort of talk about their woes of batting and share the kind of difficulties. But Wokes just finding that little gap through the gate between bat and pad for Conway, and then a lovely delivery to Kane Williamson, who he really tested and teased, didn't he, for an over or two, just going past the edge, a couple of balls nipping back, a couple of balls leaving him, and then just that little feather through to the keeper with a bit of extra bounce. Superb new ball bowling by Woakes.
Absolutely. Devon Conway has got fewer runs in this series than Zach Crawley, and if that's happening, then you know you've got a problem or two. So, yeah, he just looks out of sorts, Devon Conway. He's one of those players that, IPL or whatever, he's a sought-after player. He's batted well in the IPL. He is... has had a pretty decent Test record, but he's fallen off of late. A couple of half centuries in that series in India for New Zealand. Actually, important runs as well. But in this series, he's looked all at sea. And England have always been able to make that early incision. Yeah, Woakes said he kind of after that first innings of the first Test match where he didn't take a wicket, people started to write him off again. Why is he playing? His career's over, but he's bowled really well since then. Found his rhythm, looks a threat, even though he's bowling at around about 80 miles an hour. He can do something with the ball, and he's exploited the two surfaces. Excellent again, two good balls at the start, and England working their way through. What else was there in that New Zealand innings? Lovely bowling.
Great catch by Duckett, wasn't it? Yeah.
And a great catch by Duckett. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that, Yoz? How often that doesn't happen. You see a slip fielder move to try to anticipate the leg glance or the sweep, whatever, and it very, very, very rarely happens that the catch is taken. But this one, yeah, he knocked it up and then dived and caught it, and actually it's got a bonus wicket. It was all about the fielding, really. It wasn't really about the bowling so much. It wasn't really so much about the stroke, was it? It was just brilliant anticipation, and you gamble, and sometimes the chips come down your way.
How good was England's bowling overall? I thought it was adequate. I didn't think there was anything special about it, really. I thought that Gus Atkinson looked down on pace, as he has actually over the last couple of Test matches. Obviously, he did that brilliant hat-trick yesterday, but overall, he's only bowling at around 125, 126 kilometres an hour, which is sort of low 80s, late 70s, early 80s mile an hour. So it just lacks a little bit of a gallop at the moment. I think he's looking just as if he hasn't quite got his rhythm right. He has a slightly stuttery run, and actually I spoke to him at a dinner at the end of the season in England, talking about run-ups, and he said at times he hasn't quite got it right. And I just remember actually, we've talked about this before, I know, but getting all the timing of your run-up right is so difficult and so important, because you've got to be hitting the crease at the right speed, in the right balance, in the right body shape, and sometimes you can run in too fast, and then you are almost overbalancing when you let go of the ball, and sometimes you run in too slow, and then you're stretching at the crease, and both legs are too far apart, and it's all about transferring weight and bowling over the top of your front leg. So when your front leg is braced, and your bowling arm is right above you, so that you're letting go of it at the optimum moment, and tiny bits of you being out of sync, just fractionally, can make all the difference in speed and feel as well. Sometimes it just doesn't feel right when you're bowling, and you don't know really what to do. And that's what I mean by said before about bowlers knowing their body and knowing the days that their biorhythms are working. And actually, Atkinson said himself that he's found often it's the days when he's not trying to bowl fast when it actually comes out the best. So he's still sort of finding his own tempo for bowling. Bashir bowled quite a lot of overs into the wind and got smacked for a lot of sixes. He's still obviously a work in progress. And Carr's pretty good again today. 25 wickets now in his Test career. 16. Amazing.
Yeah, well, when they give him the ball, you feel he's going to make something happen. Of course, he did in the first over. Yeah, Bashir, a couple of wickets. Ben Stokes, it's interesting actually afterwards. Ben Stokes really praised him, didn't he? Went for a gallon today, Bashir. Went for over 100, 2 for 110 in his 19 overs, and Blundell was coming down the pitch and whacking him down the ground for 6. Someone had to do that job of bowling from one end into the wind. It's not easy. Although often, spinners kind of like bowling into the wind, don't they? But do they really want to bowl into the wind that we had in Wellington today? I mean, that's quite unusual, isn't it? Really, really strong wind, and no sport is much fun in the wind. I think we've seen it in the football over the weekend. Really, it's a bit of a lottery. Really, it can be a bit of a lottery. It's hard to just keep your balance. But everyone really, not just bowlers, but batters as well, fielders. Ollie Pope's cap was being blown off. The umpires' hats were blowing off as well. The boundary markers were being blown away. It was a sort of get the job done day from England today. I thought they actually bowled pretty well. They just exploited what was in the pitch. Bashir picked up his 2 wickets. One that he was just hit for 6 by Phillips, and then he just pushed one through. Kept a little bit low. I didn't think it was a great shot from Phillips, really giving right on the back foot and giving himself some room, exposing his stumps, and so he was out. And then the other Bashir wicket was the catch to duck it at leg slit with a brilliant anticipation.
And actually also a very good catch on the boundary by Jacob Bethel as well. A big hit that was spiralling towards going for 6, and he judged it incredibly well. A slight dive at the end, but with the wind swirling around, he made a difficult catch look easy. So England's fielding, out cricket, catching, that sharp caught and bowled by Carse. Overall, England pretty much a sort of... with the exception of Bashir, who had trouble, with that wind, it was pretty much a faultless display by England, actually, and they polished New Zealand off. 323, the victory. Fantastic series win. The first time England have won in New Zealand since 2008, since the days when Anderson and Broad first joined forces, actually. So it's been a long time coming. Credit to Stokes. Actually, I was talking to some people last night about Stokes' value and just re-emphasising that he just has that influence on a game, even though he might not be performing incredibly well with the bat or doing much bowling. He just has that influence over the game, and I think his presence inhibits the opposition and encourages England. So more power to his elbow. 19 wins for Stokes now in 31 matches, so he's actually gone ahead of Mike Brearley. More wins in the same number of Test matches than Brearley. So impressive. What a transformation he's achieved.
Right, absolutely vital to England's prospects against India and against Australia next winter, both bat, ball, captaincy, fielding, whatever, the all-round package. And I mean, today he kept himself back until the 50th over, and I was thinking, what's going on here? Is he not quite right, but he wanted Bashir to bowl into the wind. Press didn't want to bowl into the wind himself, and he did. In the end, he came on. He picked up 3 for 5, just banging the ball in. That tactic I mentioned at the start of the podcast. We're going to see a lot of that in Australia, I think, next winter. Just bashing the ball into the pitch, and you say Henry succumbed, caught by Bethel. Smith was caught down the leg side. And then Southey, actually, he went for one as well and was caught at deep mid-wicket. So Stokes in for a bit of rabbit pie there at the end. And he was actually saying, I didn't want to bowl that much into the wind. Who did? And someone had to do it. And I think that's why he praised Chris Woakes and Shoaib Bashir so much, is because the conditions weren't great and they had to do it and they did the job. And sometimes, I think, sometimes you probably sort of love the experience of bowling and being in the action. Other days you think this is just hard work and you just have to get on with it. And I'm sure everyone has that in their jobs, don't they? A lot of the time. Some days, that was a good day at work. And other days you just think, I just have to get through and make sure I do everything and get it all done. And that's a bit like it was for Woakes today and for Shoaib Bashir. But ultimately, a 3-day victory, crushing 323 runs, hugely impressive from England. Lots of all-round contributions and a very successful tour to date as the teams move on to Hamilton. I suppose, what do New Zealand do? Do they give Tim Southey his last Test match on his home ground?
It seems a bit harsh not to, doesn't it, on his home ground? I mean, he's been a superb servant to New Zealand cricket. He's got close to 400 Test wickets. He just looks finished. He just looks a spent force now. And I think, even the way he bats, he's sort of feels like a dying of the light, really. But I don't know. It's a difficult one. Whether they've got somebody that they can bring in to do that sort of job, I'm not certain. Listen, let's just quickly look at the Adelaide result. Obviously, Australia winning by 10 wickets. And India, there'll be some worries there. 180 all out first innings, 175 all out second innings. Even though Australia had no Josh Hazlewood, Scott Boland came in and took key wickets. I see today, well, at the end of the second day, got Jaiswal caught behind, good delivery, and also got Kohli as well with a good ball just around off stump. So 2 big wickets for Boland, and then the finishing touches applied by Pat Cummins, who went round the wicket, bowled some nasty short balls to some of the lower order Indians. Pant tried his best with a couple of outrageous ramp shots and reverse ramps and things like that. But in the end, the Australian bowling was just too good, and they didn't even need Nathan Lyon. Cummins, bit of Stark, the odd big in-swinging Yorker. So Stark 6 in the first innings, Cummins 6 wickets in the second innings. Together, a pretty key kind of potent combination. And India just not dealing with the moving pink ball terribly well.
No, and of course now it'll be Indian introspection, won't it? It'll be, woe is me. What's happened to our team? He's not good enough anymore. He's not good enough anymore. He's coming to the end. He's coming to the end. It's a bit like the Australian story after the last Test match. You've got 2 sides. You've got top class players in both teams, and you wouldn't want to predict the outcome of the series from here. I think a lot of people thinking after the first Test match, India are going to go on and win this series. They're going to do what they did last time and the time before, but it's too tough a series to predict. I think you've got 2 sides chock full of talent, chock full of experience. Okay, 1 or 2 are coming towards the end, moving towards the end, but I think it's a hard one to call. And in the same way that Australia bounced back here, used to say India can't bounce back in the next game. But you basically have 2 Test matches, one dominated by one dominated by the other. I mean, how do you see it now? You predicted Australia 3-1 at the start of the series. I said 3-2, but I wasn't quite sure which team to go for, and you accused me of sitting on the fence. I don't know. I think at the moment I'm slightly happier with my prediction than yours, but we'll see. It could be 3-1 with one drawn or some rain around, but it's hard to see these 2 teams drawing, especially the way the game's being played. This one over in 3 days.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think there's only been one draw in Test cricket this year so far. It's amazing, out of something like 43 Test matches. So you're probably right there. It will be a 3-2 or could be a 4-1 even. You never know. But how's it going to go? Well, they're moving on to Brisbane now, playing in Brisbane on Saturday, the 3rd Test. I mean, I just worry about the Indians' batting technique in Australia. And they've shown before that they have no fears, that they have no problems, and obviously have won big series there twice before. Sharma looks, I mean, he's come out into the series late with paternity leave, and he didn't make any runs in this series, in this Test match, and he's batting down the order at the moment. KL Rahul has continued on opening. He failed. Jaiswal, fantastic player. I'm sure he will come good. Kohli would be a worry. Kohli looks vulnerable outside off stump. So it's the Indian batting that I would be concerned about. I mean, they've got a couple of sort of replacements coming in, or potential substitutes coming in, including Mohammad Shami with the ball to take a bit of the pressure off Bumrah. And obviously the spinners are going to come into it a bit. I mean, I think the trouble is that both sides, particularly India, look a little bit just as if they're slightly ageing, don't they? Most of their players are over 30 now.
Well, India have got some young players. I mean, Reddy's only 21. Jaiswal, Gill, as you mentioned. Bumrah is the folk. I think a bit of talk about Bumrah, isn't there? How fit is he? I mean, he's so key, of course, to their prospects. He did take 4 wickets, but just a sort of, and whether it's cramp, I don't know. He bowled 1 over today, but then they were only chasing 18-19 to win. So was he going to rush in? It was quite a sort of low pace over. So that inevitably gets sort of focused on. He's down in pace. Is he carrying an injury? But they'll need him. Look, they have got some talent, India, and yes, I would probably say Australia favourites because they're at home and they've got that quality in their side. But don't write off India.
And we'll be back on this live site to review England's first day from Hamilton on Saturday morning. See you then.
Thanks for listening. Goodbye for now.